Alright, what's going on, guys? This past week, we finally got the long-awaited patch 1.09 for Elden Ring, and with it came a feature that we've been waiting on since before the game came out. And to say that this patch has the Elden Ring community up in a storm would be an understatement, because this update did a lot. It did a lot of good, and it did a lot of very bad things. But we're gonna break down all of that right now. And as we do, you guys know we're chasing down 100k subs here on the channel, getting a little bit closer every day. So if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring and FromSoftware, then do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. But with all that, let's go ahead and get into it. To structure this video, we're going to be going straight through the patch notes, but there is a bit of a problem. The patch notes are not exactly correct. This update had a lot of unseen consequences that are kind of breaking the game right now, and if go unfixed, are going to significantly affect your playthrough of the DLC, or if you're a PvP player, are having an immediate effect. And we'll discuss that whenever they're relevant in the later sections of the patch notes, so I say all that for you to keep in mind that your own personal testing is going to be necessary whenever we talk about some of these things, because like I said, there are things that have been changed that aren't exactly reflected in these notes. So let's start reading. Elden Ring Patch Notes version 1.09. New feature, ray tracing support has been added for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC versions. Ray tracing can be activated in the settings menu. For consoles, go to game options and select ray tracing, and for PC, go to graphics and select ray tracing quality. And now here's where the inaccuracies begin. On console at least, in order to actually activate ray tracing, you need to quit all the way out of the game and go back to the main menu and reload your character. Otherwise, it's just going to take your performance with no benefits, and it won't load many of the new textures. So do keep in mind to quit out before doing that. Please note that performance such as frame rate and resolution may be impacted while playing with ray tracing on. The minimum and recommended technical specifications to use ray tracing can be found at the end of the patch notes. And here you can see the qualifications. These are not generous at all. Specifically on the GPU side, you need at least a 3060 Ti to even run it, and to run it properly you need a 3070. So for those of you without a hefty gaming rig, it's not looking too good. So let's talk about how this actually performs. This update was a big deal. FromSoftware promised us that a ray tracing update would come out long before the game even released, and after over a year, here's how that played out. I did my own side-by-side testing, and you guys told me that the best place to see this in action is in Liurnia, but I gotta be honest, I could not spot out the differences. Now, the weather did play a role in this, however, what I've been told is that what you want to look out for are deeper shadows, which are supposedly most noticeable on the character, but are intended to be most significant on things like foliage and trees, and those are where I could definitely see a difference. Now, if you just take a still image, it does look a little bit better, but the problem is, at least for me on PS5, that the performance takes such a big hit that you can't actually enjoy the scenery. And if you're trying to play through the game with this on, it's gonna make it nearly impossible to fight a boss, which is really a shame considering that Elden Ring is already such a beautiful game, and if we could take the graphics to the next level while still retaining the performance, it would be an amazing experience. But as it stands right now, it is simply not worth it to play with ray tracing, which I do think is a real shame. I've also heard that playing with ray tracing on causes several audio issues and crashes, specifically over on PC. Maybe FromSoftware will continue to update the ray tracing support, but as it stands right now, I do not recommend playing with it whatsoever. But moving on now through the rest of the patch notes, we get to the balancing side of things. PvP exclusive balance adjustments. The adjustments in this section do not affect single player or cooperative play. Point 1. The inescapable frenzy incantation power and grab angle have been increased. The lifesteal fist skill power, range, and grab angle have been increased. Decrease the power of two-handed jumping attacks. This one may actually be a lie. I've heard discussion that this was actually meant to be power stancing jump attacks and not when two-handing a weapon. I do think that's the case since it makes absolutely no sense to nerf two-handing jumping attacks, but like I said, that's one of the cases where you're going to want to test it for yourself. Decrease the power of heavy and heavy running attacks of fist and claw weapon types. I've heard this one was actually pretty significant and did make the Kestis quite a bit worse, but those were running the game back in 1.08, so I can see why they did it. Decrease the power of the Founding Rain of Stars spell. Decrease the spell enhancement effect of the Terra Magica spell. Decrease the damage and poise damage of the Wave of Gold skill when hitting an opponent over a certain distance. Decrease the effectiveness of the Determination and Royal Knight's Resolve skills. Decrease the effects of the Contagious Fury skill and the Jellyfish Shield. And this actually did create a new bug. The Jellyfish Shield shield is now bugged where you can infinitely apply the buff, so hopefully they issue a hotfix for that very soon. Decrease the effectiveness of the Claw Talisman, decrease the effectiveness of the Lord of Blood's Exaltation Talisman, decrease the attack power buff granted by the White Mask head armor, decrease the jumping attack damage buff granted by the Raptor's Black Feathers armor, decrease the damage buff granted by Magic Shrouding Crack Tier, Flame Shrouding Crack Tier, Lightning Shrouding Crack Tier, and Holy Shrouding Crack Tier when activated with the Flask of Wondrous Physic. So the goal here was to nerf damage across the board on some of the standouts in PvP. A lot of these sound pretty good on paper, but the general reception that I've seen is that the meta still stays quite a bit the same. Like I said though, a lot of these you're going to want to test for yourself and think about when you're making or adjusting your builds for the Colosseum. But now we're going to switch gears for a second and look at the general balance adjustments that affect everything. And there's a lot to get through. Added an invincibility window when respawning in the Colosseum. That's a really good feature that I think should have been there in the first place, since now it's a lot harder to find modes where you can actually respawn. Increase the scaling of the following attributes when infusing weapons with certain Ashes of War: Magic, Fire, Flame Art, Lightning, Sacred. Increase the attribute scaling of the following weapon types: Colossal Sword, Great Axe, Hammer, Flail, Great Hammer, Colossal Weapon. Increase the speed, range, and recovery time of some attacks on the following weapon types: Great Hammer, Great Axe, Great Sword, and Curved Great Sword. And I've been told that this makes them feel a lot better. Flail weapon changes. Increase the speed of some attacks, reduced attack recovery time, and increased poise when using two-handed attacks. Unfortunately guys, it's not enough to bring the flail up where it needs to be, but it is a step in the right direction. Increased running attack speed and reduced attack recovery time for the following weapon types: Straight Sword, Curved Sword, Katana, Twin Blade Sword, Axe, Hammer, and Halberd. Increase the first attack speed for the following weapon types: Straight Sword, Curved Sword, and Whip. Increase the speed of guard counters for the following weapon types, and that's all of them. Once again though, like the flail, it's not enough to really make guard counters viable in PvP, but they do feel better in PvE. Reduce the attack recovery time for whip weapons, increase the damage of claw weapons, added holy damage and faith scaling to the Great Club, which is pretty cool, and then increase damage negation when blocking holy damage and decrease damage negation when blocking damage from other affinities. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that one was, since holy damage is kind of the black sheep of the group, so I'll have to test that one. But here's where we get to the big hitters. Slightly reduced rolling travel distance for light equipment weights. From my personal testing, this is not a very big nerf. Light roll still feels generally the same, but it should be a little bit easier to catch now. And then decrease the hitbox size for some attacks of the following weapon types: Thrusting Sword, Heavy Thrusting Sword, Spear, Great Spear, and Halberd. Now when I first read that, I was ecstatic because I thought these were definitely the most overpowered weapons in the game. I'm tired of getting poked from across the map. But people are telling me that this didn't get nerfed at all, and the hitboxes are still exactly the same. So again, I recommend doing your own testing on that one. Now we've got some Ash of War adjustments. Lifesteal Fist increased the target grab range, Surge of Faith increased projectile generation speed, Flame Spit increased the guard speed and blocking amount of the skill and adjusted the angle of the fireball. Tongues of Fire increased the guard speed and blocking amount of the skill. Great Oracular Bubble increased the projectile generation speed and reduced the recovery time. Viper Bite reduced the time before rolling as possible after using the skill. Shriek of Milos increased the close range poise damage. Spear Call Ritual increased projectile generation speed. Cursed Blood Slash increased projectile generation speed and reduced the recovery time. Goldbreaker reduced the recovery time. I Command Thee Kneel increased attack generation speed. Starcaller Cry increased the speed of follow-up attacks. Spinning Wheel increased attack generation speed and added a roll and heavy attack cancel timing while using the skill. So some general buffs across the board on that front. Now before we talk about the major bug fixes, let's talk about something that actually broke with this update. It's being reported that self-buffs that apply to your body or aura are actually not buffing spells and incantations. So things like Flame Grant Me Strength will not buff your fireballs, but I imagine this will get fixed very soon with a hotfix. However, as of now, it's a pretty terrible bug. Also, like I mentioned earlier, there are audio bugs whenever playing on ray tracing and doing PvP, and very substantially the jellyfish shield is broken and needs to be fixed ASAP. But here are the new bug fixes with 1.09, there's a lot of them, so let's just hit the highlights. Down there at the bottom it says improved stability in Colosseum matchmaking, so it should be a little bit easier to find a match now. Right in the middle it says fixed a bug where status buildups were unintentionally added to some weapon skills. This is huge. This is what allowed Fire's Deadly Sin to spread bleed and people could proc bleed on you by standing next to you, otherwise known as the IGN glitch. This was super prevalent in PvP, so I'm very glad they finally patched it. And then at the top there you can see that they fixed a lot of talismans that straight up did not work. So this patch did a lot. We got a lot of buffs, we got a lot of nerfs that needed to happen, so overall PvP and PvE should be feeling pretty really good, but we're simply just not done yet. Like I said, this patch also created a lot of issues that need to be addressed very quickly, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I still think ray tracing needs a ton of work, and I'm sure FromSoftware will be on top of that, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you happy with 1.09? Or do you think it was quite a bit of a disappointment after such a long wait? But either way, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here, and with all that, I will catch you in the next one.